good old Resolution by Aberrant Games, a science fiction setting where robots had feelings and religious zealots actually liked and protected psychic users. They haven't produced any new miniatures for a while, but all the old ones are still available to buy. This faction is called Ronin. They're like freelance specialists. Here we got Ronin Brick with missile launcher, Ronin Esper, Ronin Shootist, another Ronin Brick, this time with minigun, Ronin Ghost, the hacker, Ronin Brawler, and last but not least, Ronin Second. Really disappointed they're not making any more of them. This was quite a cool little science fiction range. I suppose this lady hits like a ton of bricks, hence Ronin Brick. She carries a massive missile launcher, and if you think that's not how you spell Rhino, it actually stands for Rip You a New One. It's a Ratchet and Clank reference. Rhino was a multiple missile launcher, and those games always had a number of innuendos aimed at mature audience. I think it might have been better if she only had one lip ring, because two make her look like she has fangs. This is what some of my friends whom I showed this miniature to thought they were. She actually had a couple of metal studs in her forehead as well, which made her look like she had horns. I thought that was too much, so I scraped them off. Oh, and those two claws which are sticking out of the gauntlet make her look like she's flipping a bird. How rude. Ronin Esper. This was before I started making scenic bases for all my miniatures, or this lady would have been surrounded by flames, because Espers have pyrokinetic psychic powers and can teleport too. There are some exceptions. Characters like Jazz Bucket have telekinetic powers instead. Now, unfortunately there is no Jazz Bucket miniature, but you can always make a conversion. In fact, I was planning making one myself. Wouldn't it be nice if there was more of these named characters made by modifying existing character classes? They were originally introduced in Resolution Outbreak, like Marshall Harris, Hitomi without Doug's armor, and of course Jazz Bucket. I'm glad they actually gave these characters points values, so they can be used in normal games and not just in special scenarios. But we definitely need more of them. How about Ronin characters who became vassals of Dravani? That could be interesting. Or there's the rest of Bang Bang Gang. Ronin Shootist, the alternative one. I actually wanted to convert this miniature, like she's doing a back somersault while shooting her guns, like she does on a page 98 of Resolution Rulebook. But the pose looked truly odd upside down. It was nothing like that illustration, so I abandoned that idea and just made her leaping forward, Matrix style. Now let's talk about the base. It turned out quite an impressive piece of concrete jungle. Here we got some steps going up, all sorts of pipes and drains, and of course torn concrete with armature rods sticking out. This actually makes me want to rip the rest of my Resolution miniatures off their bases and to do proper scenic bases for the rest of them. Because miniatures with good scenic bases are just more interesting than the ones without. Ronin Brick with a Gatling gun. He really should have been in a bigger base. He can barely fit in a small one, and his arms are spread really wide as well. But otherwise he's actually my favorite Ronin miniature. They should have really made a named character based on Brick profile. It doesn't need to be anything major, just a few small tweaks, like alternative skills, or alternative weapon, or maybe a Ronin Brick who works for a specific faction, like, for example, a Brick who works for Vatasina should be armed with a flamethrower, or what about a really creepy Brick cleric who works for Drovani and carries an electric weapon. If Aberrant can't afford sculpting new miniatures, they should have made a lot more of these named characters. That would give fans of the game a chance to be creative by making conversions, as well as create some needed interest in the game. Think about it, Aberrant. Ronin Ghost. When you think about hacking in miniature wargames, things like hacking your opponent's technology, opening and closing doors remotely, using hacking devices or remote boards to achieve objectives, or just frying the brains of rival hackers. You might instantly think Infinity, but Resolution did all this a year earlier, all the way back in 2004. Actually, I remember comparing Infinity and Resolution hacking rules back then, and I thought how similar the two were. Of course, in the third edition, Corvus barely really improved the hacking rules for Infinity, but Resolution was their best. I really should do something about that base. Miniatures without bases stand out a bit too much from the rest of my collection. Ronin Brawler. He is the second Resolution miniature, which I produced with a scenic base. It's fairly simple, just some metal railing, but it adds a lot to the miniature. First of all, the whole thing is slightly sloped, so the miniature is leaning forward to the point that it's almost horizontal. This makes the pose even more dynamic. He really looks like he's dashing forward. I also used a flare bit from Warhammer Chaos Lord on Juggernaut. It adds even more speed to the pose. He's dashing forward so quickly the sparks are flying. Ronin Brawler actually has a special ability called Beeline. He charges in a straight line, crushing through the enemies. So this pose change is very suitable, and it's not even a conversion. I only tilted the miniature forward a bit. Sometimes you can change a lot by doing very little. Ronin Second. Now, I understand that Resolution is not a WYSIWYG game, but it would have been nice if the miniatures at least had their primary weapon on them. And I suppose a really simple conversion could have fixed this. But back then I didn't do that much converting, and I didn't have the suitable weapon bit, like a little assault rifle or possibly a little sci-fi weapon to represent Paul's gun. Now I'm probably going to leave it as it is, because I really don't like converting miniatures which already been painted. I suppose you could just have the weapon lying on the ground, as if it'd been dropped, but that's not particularly interesting, unless you make like an open briefcase with a Paul's gun in it, because unconcealed exotic weapons attract way too much attention. And so another video comes to an end. Subscribe to my channel, leave your comments below, and take care.